Italy go to the polls on the 4th of March. So we're going to have a quick look at Italy's chart, look at the different parties that are going up there. Now, at the end of 2016, before Italy had its referendum, I did have a look at Italy's chart in terms of the natal potentials and just a general summary of what Italy's chart says about modern Italy. So if you want to have a look at that to see, just a bit about Italy's chart, please go back to that, because this now is just mainly going to focus on the election that's coming. So what's interesting about this election is there's a surge of support for the anti-EU and the kind of right-wing parties. So, for example, at the moment, the centre-right coalition is on 37%, and that's made up of Forza Italia in the Northern League and the Italian Brotherhood. Forza Italia is the party that's really inspired by Silvio Berlusconi. So he can't hold office until 2019 because he's got some fraud kind of charges still lingering, and he has to serve out his penalty, so he can't actually take control, but he is the driving force behind that particular party. So you can see centre-right, 37%. Next we have Five Star with 28%. Of course, Five Star is a kind of rough coalition, and they are an anti-EU, anti-austerity party. Five Star are not keen on going into coalition with any of the others. And then you've got the centre-left coalition, 27%. Centre-left, they're in control at the moment. The EU are rather happy with them because they've been sticking to all the tough austerity measures, and because of that, Italy has stabilised and some parts of the economy are doing okay, but loads of people are really cheesed off with that whole thing, as you can see by the voting intentions. So they changed the Italy's voting system is not enshrined in the constitution. They changed it last, I think it was in end of 2016. They now have something called the Rosa Stellum rules, which means part of their parliament is made up of seats divided up according to proportional representation, and part of the parliament is directly linked to constituency seats. So 37% for the centre-right coalition is not enough for them to get a majority based on the proportional rep and the other side of the party. They need more than 40%. So at the moment, it's really unsure of what would happen. So we're going to see what the chart says for Italy. Okay. So one of the first things I noticed about this chart is that on that very important few degrees of Capricorn, sort of 20 degrees of Capricorn, I see Italy has a conjunction between Venus and Saturn. Now, that conjunction is going to be triggered by the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 2020, and that would also have been triggered by the Neptune-Uranus conjunction that was happening in 1993 at the birth of the EU at the time of the Maastricht Treaty. So that particular area, which triggers the 8th house of Italy's horoscope, which means loans, international agreements, maybe international sort of financial arrangements like the euro, is being triggered. So so at the beginning, Maastricht Treaty, it's triggered, and now it's being triggered again, which says to me something important is happening to do with Italy's relationship with the EU. Next, we have a look at transiting Neptune is square Uranus. Now, Uranus is the sign that's always got to do with moves to the right or to the left. It's when politics become more radical, more rebellious. And so the fact that that's been triggered leads me to believe it's going to be a shift off to the right wing, which is going to be a destabilizing force for the whole of the EU, because Berlusconi, one of their policies in their party is to create a second-tier euro for countries like Italy and other Mediterranean countries, all the pigs. Five Star want to take Italy out of the euro altogether, so they also have very different policies on NATO. So again, any of those parties on the right is going to lead to massive changes, and it could really help people with Brexit, help the UK with Brexit as well, in having an ally with Italy. Of all the countries, Italy look the most likely of the European nations to rebel against the EU, probably because they're taking the brunt of this whole refugee crisis as well, and they've not been helped out particularly well by the EU. Now, there are a couple. Now, the chart I'm using for Italy here is the 1946 chart, but there have been other charts along the times for Italy. For example, there was the March 1861 chart, which was set in Turin. There was also the 2nd of July 1871 chart. What we're looking at here is the 10th of June 1946 chart. But those charts all have something in common, a Uranus-Neptune theme. And this Uranus-Neptune theme has been present every time there was a really important event in Italian history, and one of those was when they entered the euro. And I see again echoes of this theme very strongly, and why I think it really is zinged for me is the echoes are not only in the solar chart but also in the transits. So right now you've got transiting Uranus there, is transiting Neptune, should I say, square Uranus. And Uranus is also very close to the Sun in the North Node. North Node always very significant in terms of the leadership of the country, the direction of the country, how that leadership is going to steer the country in a new direction. So that's very significant. And if you look over here, replicating the transit, we have solar arc Neptune opposite Uranus. So this very important combination of planets, which has always been there when important things have happened in Italian history, is here, double whammy of it. Therefore, I do think that this year, this election is going to be a significant time. But I don't think the result of the election will be clear-cut. There are a couple of possibilities. For example, the centre-right and the centre-left can form a coalition. And I think as soon as the election's over, the European Union will probably be down there saying, come for a meeting, you'd better form a coalition, because isn't that what they told Austria to do? They kind of determined the outcome of what the coalition talks should be. However, there's another choice. They can carry on with a kind of hung parliament where the centre-right, which won't have an overall majority under that scenario, can work with Five Star on a kind of ad hoc basis and hold things together. That has actually been working in some of the other European nations who weren't able to form a coalition. And I think that would work rather well, because although Five Star doesn't want to form a coalition, which would actually be very strong, because that would take the whole sort of right side anti-EU portion of the parliament to well over 60%, which would give them a lot of power. Five Star could work on a case-by-case basis with the centre-right party, creating a more empowered atmosphere. Now, I talked when I did the UK chart about Silvio Berlusconi being quite close to Putin, and I talked when I originally did Italy's chart of these close ties between Italy and Russia that have gone on for the years, almost an unlikely combination, and I think stemming from the fact that, as you can see, Italy has Scorpio rising and the Soviet Union was a Scorpio, so maybe that's what kind of drew them together in this pact that has lasted. Now, Silvio Berlusconi has also been emboldened by Trump. He is now kind of talking of himself, although he's 82 years old, he's still got quite a lot of energy to give to this cause. And I think what with Brexit and with Trump, he will feel bolder now to take on the EU. He can probably see the cracks, as a lot of us can, and that's why I think there is going to be a new, bold direction for Italy, and this election is just the start. So while this election won't give rise to a definitive result where you're going to have a definite sort of centre-right party that can immediately start enforcing rules, I think it's going to lead to certainly an unstable period in Italian politics, but one that is eventually going to lead more and more, or possibly to another election further down the line, where they can take that step and form a kind of anti-EU coalition which can take things forward in terms of the euro, a different arrangement with the euro and Italy, and also look to not be so strict with its austerity measures as the centre-left have been, following them sort of to the T. Okay, so that's Italy's chart, and I think that's most of the things that I wanted to say about it. But going forward now to this 2020 coalition, 2020 conjunction with Pluto and Saturn, that also shows us big moves for Italy, although financially also an uncertain time, but that's echoed in the UK chart and in the EU chart, so that's going to be a kind of global thing. They've kept kicking this whole financial crisis thing down the road, but that is getting to a crunch time when they won't be able to do that anymore. So definitely changes for Italy, new direction for Italy. Italy following maybe not exactly the UK path with leaving totally, but definitely becoming the next most rebellious member of the Eurozone, of the European community, and using their status as the third biggest economy in the EU to push very hard for changes and to kick up their heels and say enough is enough.